トビデオ
An intriguing thing about anime is that, because it originated from a country that has its own unique cultural baggage and standards, some of what might really resonate with its home audience might not resonate with its audience overseas. Though we live in a global economy where goods and cultures are exchanged every day, not everything is going to translate fully. There's always going to be stories or characters that resonate with the Japanese audience more than a Western audience. This is shown a lot in popularity polls in manga. Look at any of the English-speaking comments at some of these and marvel at how many people will complain about the target audience having poor taste. It's the same thing vice versa. Media that will sometimes get a muted response in Japan can sometimes end up finding its audience in the West. Big O was considered to be a costly failure in its home country, which caused its planned 26-episode order to be cut in half. But its success on Toonami and subsequently Adult Swim allowed it to have a renewed lease on life and pretty much allowed the creator's vision for the series to come to fruition. Today's anime involves this phenomenon. In one country, a standard 48-minute OVA adaptation that ended up having negative repercussions on the work it was based on. In another country, a key work in the early days of licensing and localization of manga and anime. And best of all, it's Bikini Girls in Space anime.
I'm Calm. Pleased to meet you. What's your name?
Gum?
Planet Earth is under attack and we are losing big. 19-year-old photojournalist Tetsuya Wakatsuki is on the ground recording the invasion for the press, and boy does he ever get the shot of the lifetime. Right when he arrives, he ends up recording a scantily clad babe slicing through soldiers like a knife through warm butter. A terrifying and sexy sight to behold, and one that can really net the ratings. But before Tetsuya can celebrate his Pulitzer-winning display of sex and violence, his eyes meets that of the sexy murder girl, and it looks like he might be the next one to get a lot off the top. Lucky for him, the girl has found a much better use for him. And it's in his pants! After getting hot, Tetsuya is knocked out cold. He wakes up in a big starcraft surrounded by ugly frog people and finds out that he is the newfound beau of the horny lady, who we learned is named Calm. She tells him that her race were the original precursors of planet Earth, whom they've dubbed the Holy Planet, and their invasion basically amounts to bug-bombing cockroaches in an old house. Tetsuya's status as a newfound fiancé for an alien princess conflicts with him. On one hand, his marriage to Calm happened without his consent, and it might just be her trying to get back at her father, the Emperor leading the invasion. On the other hand, if they can convince him that they are in love, the human race can be spared complete and total alien annihilation. Plus, she's pretty damn hot.
I think we're good.
I had been sitting on this for a while. An anime like 1986's Outlanders was going to be covered on this show sooner or later. It's got the classic feel of a mid-80s OVA all over it. Interstellar setting, surprisingly good fight and effects animation, the whole story being centered around a colorful-haired babe in bikini armor who also happens to get a lot of nude scenes, you know the drill.
And I thought you were horny before, get it? Because you have horns?
But researching this, I was totally caught off guard by how much of a history this OVA has on both sides of the pond, for completely opposite reasons. On one side, it is a flop so notorious it had massive blowback on the source material. On the other side, it is the foundational building block of a nascent industry that's only just starting to take shape. And on either side, Outlanders has totally been forgotten. Gotta say, lucked out on this one. Not just one history that needs to be told, but two in one blow. The first instance of just pure disparity between two countries in terms of reception. But the question is, which one got it right? Pour the wine, kiddies. What I'm about to talk about is gonna be out of this world.
Oh, the warp's over!
We'll start with the history of Outlanders in its country of origin, Japan. Outlanders was a creation sired by rookie mangaka Johji Manabe. Born on December 18, 1965, Manabe got bitten by the art bug early in middle school, with his favorite things to draw being highly detailed spacecraft and beautiful women. He was driven to break into the manga field early, and the concept of Outlanders had been a project he had been developing since his first year of vocational school. During his studies, Manabe submitted manga one-shots to publisher Hakushinsha. After one of them got published, he was asked to come down to their offices and see if he had any ideas he would like to pitch. During the pitch, he showed off the design for the character Calm to the editor, proposing that she would be the main character for his new manga, Outlanders. The Hakushinsha editor bought the pitch, and Outlanders would make its debut a few months later in the January issue of Monthly Kamikami in 1985. Manabe was an old-school sci-fi otaku who adored works like Star Wars and Flash Gordon, and Outlanders was his attempt to make a space opera in that vein. His editors wanted him to really focus on the action and violence of the story, but his main focus was on the war between Earth and the alien Santo Vasco Empire, with Tetsuya and Calm being POV characters for both sides of the conflict. Now, it's actually important to remember that the war is the centerpiece of the whole manga, not the marriage between Calm and Tetsuya. That's only brought up as a last-ditch effort by Calm to save humanity after her father, Emperor Cuevas, gives the order to wipe out all of humanity by, no joke, vaporizing the entire country of Japan. And the relationship between Tetsuya and Calm starts off more as a relationship of convenience for both parties that ends up blossoming into something truly romantic as the manga goes on. And while their war is incredibly destructive, humanity is not shown to be a perfect victim. It turns out there's an entire shadow government running global affairs that has been in conflict with the Empire centuries past, and they also have no interest in peace. They are ready and willing to use ancient alien sorcery to not just destroy the Empire, but to take their place as the de facto galactic conquerors, particularly the second antagonist, General Togo, the head of the JDSF who wishes to take his brand of Japanese nationalism beyond the stars. Outlanders was incredibly popular very early in its run. Manabe was able to move out to Tokyo and get his own office with assistants, and while he himself said that most of the story was improvised on the fly by having his characters do their own thing, he did have plans for the manga to span exactly 10 volumes, with the war ending with a clear winner and loser. The popularity of the manga, coinciding with a home video market that was growing like kudzu, meant that an anime OVA was unavoidable. This one would be funded by the legendary Tatsunoko Productions. Tatsunoko at this point had already dipped their toe in the OVA game by being the main movers and shakers behind AIC and Artmix ambitious co-production Megazone 23, and them getting AIC back for this project could only mean they wanted to follow up on such success. Director of the project was Katsuhisa Yamada, whose career we've gone over in much detail in my video on his other big OVA credit, Junk Boy. No comment there. Screenplay was done by the team of Kenji Terada, the main screenwriter for Kimaguri Orange Road and the first 3 Final Fantasy games, and Sukehiro Tomita, who wrote for the Golf Force movie and would later graduate to writing scenarios for the Sailor Moon anime. So the people in charge of adapting this manga to a 48-minute home video anime were no slouches in their departments. They clearly had the talent to adapt Manabe's work to the small screen. So it's interesting to learn that when the OVA was finally released on December of 1986, the reception was not great, particularly from its author. Johji Manabe hated this anime adaptation of his work with the fiery passion of the sun, to the point that he called the staff incompetent. And this is after he provided a voice for the anime as a lowly prison guard that bites the big one. So even after working closely with the staff, the fact that he chose not to mince words here tells us he was not happy. For good reason, because while the OVA sold well, it apparently damaged the relationship Manabe had with Hakushinsha, to the point that there might have actually been a lawsuit involved regarding unpaid dues. All of this was a butterfly effect that killed any motivation Manabe had with ending Outlanders with the ending he had in mind. This is why the final chapters of the manga involve both humanity and the Santo Vasco Empire getting completely wiped out, with 90% of the principal cast dying in the final battle. The only happy note it ends on is Tetsuya and Calm surviving to go on and raise a family with each other while being visited by the deceased spirits of their comrades every year. Which I guess is why, despite the initial popularity, Outlanders as a manga phenomenon seems to have been struck from the history books. Whatever larger plans Manabe and the publishers had in mind appeared to have been scuttled in the wake of the OVA's reception, and it never recovered after that. Manabe moved on to other manga, leaving Outlanders' legacy adrift, unable to find a new audience that could appreciate it for what it was. Until it did. Now we get to the much anticipated second half of the history lesson, and it begins with a little company called Dark Horse Comics. Dark Horse Comics was founded in 1986 by Mike Richardson, announcing his new publishing company to the world with the first issue of the anthology comic Dark Horse Presents. The goal of this company was to highlight new up-and-coming comic authors who worked outside the DC Marvel system, and the venture was an immediate success since its launch coincided with the rise of the comic book store. Dark Horse's growth mostly came through licensing deals and buying the comic book rights to franchises such as Godzilla and Star Wars. But Richardson was always wanting to branch out in order to grow his business, and he found an unlikely business partner in a man named Torrin Smith. Torrin Smith is someone whose history necessitates its own video, so to keep it short, he is largely the one credited as being the first to translate and export manga over to the States in an official capacity. Dark Horse decided they wanted in and partnered with Smith's own Proteus Studios. The first title was Outlanders. Smith had pitched the idea to the manga's publisher in 1988 at San Diego Comic-Con, and they agreed that Proteus and Dark Horse would be the perfect company to publish the complete run of Outlanders to American audiences. One important thing to note is that early manga chapters were released in America as if they were comic books, monthly paperback releases done in the left-to-right format that English readers were used to at the time. Smith, of course, would do the translations, and even Manabe got involved with redrawing a few panels. The experience was enough to make him consider doing a sequel, if only so he could, quote, get it right. And naturally, the popularity of the manga meant that the OVA eventually made it over thanks to US renditions. This was done through their Dark Image Entertainment label, through which they hawked the more mature titles in their repertoire. According to the trades at the time, it was quite the hit, being the third best-selling VHS of November 1993. Its early success was able to buy it some staying power, even in the retro-unfriendly times of the mid-2000s. After US renditions went under, Central Park Media snatched at the license in 2005 and produced their own redub, complete with era-appropriate humor.
What do you see in that banana-eating retard anyway?
More fascinatingly, it was a redub where the casting was decided via fan poll. And I only bring this up because the most noteworthy person who got cast in the redub was Sean Schemmel, the voice of Goku. He was cast to play both Tetsuya and Giobaldi, and it's a great showcase of his range.
No, that doesn't mean I'm not like totally interested in you. It's just that...
Hey, can't you just be happy for her, you bitch?
You're the bitch. Just shut up and drink this.
So there you have it. Two histories, one leading to a downfall, the other being part of a rise. Who knew that such a violent titty fest could have that much of an impact in the anime and manga world, and then vanish from the zeitgeist years later? And considering we have yet to hear from Discotech about any Outlanders Blu-rays yet, the history books remain firmly closed for the time being. But what about the Outlanders OVA itself? Does it deserve both reputations? Like a lot of its contemporary critics, my feelings on Outlanders are mixed. Visually, I think it's another excellent example of the unleashed creative energy of the OVA era. Animation director Hiroshi Hamasaki does a laudable job in translating Manabe's character designs to screen, not just with the cute ladies like Calm and Batia, but also with the more overly complicated character designs like Giobaldi, Cuevas, and Progress.
And it's pronounced progress!
We also have the animation itself. Outlanders is dripping with those classic hand-drawn 80s effects animation that we don't get anymore, whether they be military vehicles exploding or Calm healing a broken Tetsuya via a Kamehameha.
I'm not letting you die!
You've got Yasuomi Umetsu doing a beautifully bloody sequence where Calm slices and dices a bunch of hapless soldiers. Masayoshi Tano doing the spectacularly climactic shot where Giobaldi destroys Progress's ship. But my favorite is the, quote, friendly duel between Calm and Batia done by Katsuhiko Nishijima. For what is basically a sparring session, he really struts his stuff through his choreography and camera work, and putting the force behind every swing of the blade.
Calm's fighting that maniac for me? Really?
But On the whole, I think Manabe was completely justified in saying how he felt about this OVA. I watched this before I had actually read the manga and done the research, and I was ready to write this off as just another slice of 80s cheese, an enjoyable, if flawed, popcorn anime. But after I learned more about its source material and I let my thoughts simmer on that for a bit, I came to the conclusion that Outlanders is kinda bad. Whereas 1985 was this explosion of creativity and passion projects as the OVA came into its own, 1986 is the hangover year. Video producers have figured out what sells and what doesn't, and have started to make demands that creators make their anime more lurid because that's what pushes tapes. Outlanders reeks of that boozy hangover because it is not concerned about adapting Manabe's story at all. Instead, it's attempting to rip off a more popular franchise at the time. I'm sure some of you have figured out which franchise that is. Manabe's main quarrel with the anime staff was that they were trying to turn his space opera about intergalactic warfare into Urusei Yatsura with gore and nudity. The main reason why he lost motivation to finish his comic at his own pace was because he was getting letters from people who had not read his manga accusing him of ripping off Urusei Yatsura, which he totally wasn't. It wasn't just that AIC did a bad adaptation, they totally misrepresented the manga they were adapting. For one thing, as much as it fuels the main conflict, the war between Earth and the Empire feels completely superfluous. They give the reason why the Empire is attacking Earth, but never elaborate beyond that. Instead, the war only exists as a way to give some friction between Calm and her alien pals like Batia and Giabaldi in a guess who's coming to dinner scenario. The war being shuffled off into the background also eliminates the non-Tetsuya human cast like Togo, Tetsuya's boss Aki, and Calm's human rival Liza. The result is rendering a world-ending conflict where the fate of humankind rests in the balance kinda moot. Once Calm announcing to her father that she intends on marrying Tetsuya goes over like a lead balloon, they're like, oh well, we tried, let's elope. And planet Earth is never brought up ever again. Because the war is not what the Outlanders OVA is about. Do you want to know what it's actually about? It's about whether or not Tetsuya and Calm get to fuck. I am not joking. Any conflict or awkwardness in their relationship is dealt with pretty quickly and they immediately hit the honeymoon phase. And every time they try to get between the sheets, they are usually interrupted by something or someone, whether it be the Emperor's advisor Progress, or the ugly minions-esque children of Calm's frog people servants. God damn, they get so much screen time and I want to throw up every time I have to gaze upon them. AIC does care about adapting some of the manga's original plot points like Tetsuya dueling Giabaldi to get them on their side, but the gravity is lost when it's less about a loyal soldier of an empire switching sides for the sake of an enemy race, and more about making sure Tetsuya is a good catch for the princess. Also, this far more plot-important duel is animated way clunkier than Calm and Batia's duel. Sounds like someone had their priorities straight. So everybody escapes the Empire with Giabaldi destroying Progress's fleet. Progress! And now Tetsuya and Calm get to fuck in peace. Same goes for Giabaldi and Batia. Everybody gets to get horizontal off into the sunset. Forget about the war, forget about humanity's fate, forget about the God damn it! Why were they the last thing I see in this anime? It's all coming together now. I now understand why Manabe had such a poor reaction to the final cut of this OVA. It painted the space opera he was spending many sleepless nights on as nothing more than a tawdry also-ran for horny otaku. I understand why an anime like Outlanders has lost any of the staying power it had 17 years ago, despite being an important part of a burgeoning otaku landscape for a time. It's not just because of age, but because we are swimming in much more narratively satisfying anime and don't need the novelty of this ain't your granddad's anime to grab eyeballs. Better anime stuck around. Outlanders did not. Outlanders is another case of the how it got made being way more interesting than the anime itself. And in this case, we got two for the price of one. Isn't the exportation of culture a beautiful thing? Unlike those. Thank God I don't have to look at them anymore now.